Monday, and welcome back to another Breakfast by the Bay. My name is Captain Meghan, and behind the camera today we have Miss Reagan. We hope that everybody had a fantastic weekend, and thank you again for joining us for another Breakfast by the Bay. We are getting into our last week of this, so we hope that you tuned in for all of them and are now Bay experts. If you are tuning in from a school, we would love for you to drop that in the comments. And if you have any questions, you can also put those into the comments and we will try to answer them. And if not, we will definitely get back to you as well. So today, we are going to be talking about morphology. And we'll get into that in just a few minutes. But because we are Bay experts now, we've talked a lot about fish. But we're going to get to take a closer look into them and talk all about their shapes of them. So again, if you're just joining us, welcome to another Breakfast by the Bay. My name is Captain Meghan, and behind the camera today we have Miss Reagan. So let's get started. So like I said, today we're going to be talking all about this word morphology. Well, what is morphology? It is the study of structure or form and overall shape of an organism. And today, we are going to be focusing in on the shapes and the structures of fish. Now, if you tuned in a few months ago with Mr. Jeff, he took you through some structures and some of the things that all fish have in common. So we're just going to review that a little bit today. So if you see over here, I have my diagram of a fish. Now remember, there are a few important parts to this fish. The first one I want to point out right here are these nares, or their nostrils. And they're used for scent, not breathing. Because remember, fish have those gills on their sides that help them breathe. The next thing that we want to point out is this line right here, and that's called their lateral line. And that helps the fish navigate even when their vision is greatly impaired. The next thing that we want to point out is their caudal fin. Now, if you remember from a few months ago with Mr. Jeff pointing out those different parts of a fish, you might remember that our caudal fin is just another name for their tail fin. And the tail fin provides the main thrust used in swimming. And we're going to be talking a lot about the different structures of caudal fins in just a few minutes. The next fin that we're going to point out is the pelvic fin, so the fins that are underneath the fish. And this helps the fish turn and balance and even breathe. Then we have our dorsal fin. And our dorsal fins are those top fins on top of the fish. They can either be short or, like our flounders, they can be one long continuous dorsal fin. And our dorsal fins help stabilize and steer and prevent them from rolling over while they're turning at high speeds. So a super important fin. And our last one that we're going to talk about is that pectoral fin. And the pectoral fins help to keep balance and can help provide lift for that fish. So those are just some of the structures, the fins that we have on our fish. And now we're really going to dive into that morphology, or the structures of a fish. And the first thing that we're going to talk about is the body shapes of fish. Now, scientists really like to study the structures of fish because it can tell them a lot about their habits that they have, like where they live and what they like to feed on, and maybe if they're a predator or not. So there are a lot of different body shapes for a fish, and we're going to be talking about 5 different ones today. The first one we're going to talk about is the Fusiform, and this is a fish that normally lives on the bottom of the bay. It would flap its fin up and down to swim, and some good examples of this would be a skate and a flounder. Now, as we go through these, I want you to try to remember these different body shapes in your mind, because we're going to go on a little aquarium tour in just a few minutes, looking at different fish, seeing if we can fit them into these different categories. So that's our Fusiform. Our next one that we have is our Fusiform, and you can see that they're long and they kind of look like a snake. They slither through the water like a snake, and a good example of ones that we have in the bay would be our eels. So we have our depressiform and our filiform so far. Our next one that we're going to talk about is our compressiform. And it looks thin when viewed from the front. So you might be able to only see the snout of the fish and maybe its eyes, but you might not be able to see the rest of it because it is so thin. It's made for sharp turns and quick bursts of speed. And these compressiform fish really like to live in reefs or maybe by pilings or shipwrecks because they're made for fast and quick turns. So they can really maneuver around those reefs and the pilings. And then these compressiform fish like to school when they're in the open waters. So we have our depressiforms, which are our flat ones, our filiform, which is our eels, our snake-like ones, and then also our compressiform ones that are those really thin, kind of look like they're compacted and squished fish. The last two body shapes that we're going to talk about is our fusiform. Our fusiforms are torpedo-shaped, which just means that they're thicker in the middle and then they taper off at both ends. They have an oval cross section, so if you were to cut the fish open, you would see that it has that oval shape, and they usually live in open water. So that's our fusiform. Our last body shape that we're going to talk about for our fish today is our globiform. So they're globe-like, so they're pretty round. And a really good example of these are all of our puffers that we have in the bay. So those are 5 different structures, the body structures of the fish. And remember, try to keep those in the back of your mind for just a few minutes, because we're going to take a little tour and see if we can find live fish that fit some of these categories. All right, the next thing that we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the mouth structures of a fish. Now, I know a couple months ago, Mr. Jeff talked a little bit about the mouth structures, telling the scientists maybe what that fish eats and where it lives. We're going to dive just a little bit deeper into that right now. So, it reveals much about the fish and its habits that they have. The position, shape, size are all related to what the fish do. So, bottom-feeding fish have a downward pointing mouth, and that's known as an inferior mouth, which would be this one right here. An inferior mouth, they usually feed off the bottom and are either predators or bottom-dwelling scavengers or grazers. So a fish that has an inferior mouth, a good example that I like to think about is the skates that we have. That mouth is underneath their bodies, and they're kind of the vacuum cleaners and will go along eating whatever is on the bottom. Surface-oriented fish have upward or superior pointing mouths, so it would be this one right here. They feed on food that is above them and are most likely predators. And then the last one that we want to talk about is the terminal one. So most fish fall into the category of having a terminal mouth, and that just means that they have their mouth located at the end of their snout. You can see it's directly right at the end of their face. They might have a subterminal one, which means that it's still at the end of their snout, but it might be just a little bit lower. And usually these type of fish that fall into the terminal category, they like to chase their food or feed on what is ahead of them. Usually they're aggressive and fast swimmers. So that's just a little bit diving into the structures of their mouth. Scientists can get very deep into what each different structure has, telling you what the fish is. All right, the next and last thing that we're going to talk about is the caudal fin. Does anybody remember what the caudal fin means again? I hope you said tail fin, and if you did, you are correct. So we're going to just take a little bit of a closer look at them. And if you've ever looked at a fish before, you might notice not all fish have the same type of tail. They might have one that's more squared or forked or even truncated or pointed. And by looking at the caudal fin or the tail fins of a fish can really tell you a lot about how that fish swims. So if we go over and we look at one that's more rounded, there's a large amount of surface area, allows for sharp turns and quick starts for predator avoidance. And a good example of one that's round would be our clownfish, or the ones here in the bay would be our pufferfish, have that rounded one. So they're good for that sharp turns and quick starts to get away from their predators. If we go and look over ones that is a truncated tail, we can see that a good example would be our Flounder Fin, and it allows for short bursts of speed to escape those predators, or a constant slow swimming. And usually the ones that have a truncated tail are going to be our bottom-dwelling fish. Our last one that we might talk about would be our lunate ones, and it's more of like a half moon shape. They're fast-moving swimmers, and there's less drag for them. And a really good example would be a tuna or a swordfish. So those are just some of the different types of caudal fins that they have. There's tons of different fish species out there, so there are definitely more than just these, but those are the ones that I like to highlight for you today. So now that we have taken a look at the body shapes of different fish and their mouth positions and some examples of different caudal fins, we're actually going to go on a mini tour of our aquarium to try to find different fish that fit our different categories. We ready? All right.
Ready.
So we're going to head over here first. And we are going to come to our Flounder Exhibit. And we're going to look into our Flounder Exhibit. You can see that we have a few different kinds in here. And we're going to have Miss Reagan zoom in. I don't think we have seen this one yet. We are going to zoom in on our hog choker. So our hog choker is pretty cool. It's one of our smaller flounder species, our flatfish species. It actually doesn't have that top pectoral fin, which is pretty unique about it. And it's called a hog choker. You might have learned this from Adam a little while ago, but in colonial times, the farmers used to feed these hog chokers to the pigs, and the pigs wouldn't be able to swallow them very well. So that's how they got their name. So if we think back to the different body shapes that I told you about, which category do we think this hog choker fits in? Do we think it might be filiform, compressiform, depressiform? I hope you said depressiform, because this is a really good example of that flat fish that we have, and they definitely fit the category of depressiform. All right, we're going to head to the next room to see if we can find some more examples. All right, so now we're coming to our Bay of the Future tank, and we actually have two different good examples in here of some body shapes. So let's zoom in, because he's saying hi right away. We'll zoom in on the burrfish. And what kind of structure, shape, do we think that one has?
Looks kind of round to me.
It is very round. It kind of looks like a globe, maybe. So I hope maybe at home you remembered that word globiform, because our burrfish would fit into that category. And maybe we'll see another example of a globiform in just a few minutes. Now, if we look at this beautiful silverfish in the back, we can see that it's very compact and looks like it's compressed. The burrfish wants the attention. And this is a moonfish. And I know Miss Jess probably taught you a lot about the moonfish before, but our moonfish would fit in our category of compressiform. And they are the ones that like to be schooling. And if you remember, they are our tropical strays. So we had two really good examples in here. Now let's move on and see if we can find another example. So if we come over here, I don't think we have met this one yet, because this fish likes to hide in our seahorse tank. But this fish is known as a rock gunnel. And rock gunnels would fit our category of our filiforms, right? It looks very eel-like. And a really cool fact about our rock gunnel friends is that they like to live in rocks or under seaweed, and they are actually able to survive outside of water because their slimy skin prevents them from drying out and allows them to slither into safe crevices. So they can actually breathe out of water for a little bit. And that is a good example of our filiform. So we found examples of our depressiform, filiform, compressiform. I don't think we found any of our fusiform yet. So let's go back to our main room and see what we can find. So if Miss Reagan comes over here, I don't think we have seen these too much yet. We already saw our other puffers, but these are our northern puffers, and they fit into the category of our globiforms. And these are actually not poisonous. Some puffers are poisonous, but our northern puffer friends are not. And they actually puff up by inhaling air or water into a special chamber near their stomachs. And they have kind of a beak-like mouth to crush shells of small mollusks, crustaceans, and other invertebrates. All right, let's move over one window and see if our good example of our fusiform friend is out. And he is hiding right now. That is a good tog right there. That might be a fusiform where it's tapered. You can kind of see maybe in the corner something slithering along. That would be our filiform, our eel. And then in the back, he might come back out again. He's under the rock right now. And that's our striped bass. And you can really see a good example of that torpedo-shaped body where it's thicker in the middle and tapered off at the sides. All right, everybody, so we did find all of those fish that fit into our categories. And I hope that you guys had a really great time learning about morphology and looking deeper into the structures of the fish. We really thank you for joining us. And if you would like the work that we are doing, there is a link that you can follow in the comments if you would like to donate to Save the Bay. We would definitely appreciate it. And we will see you again on Wednesday and Friday for our last breakfast by the bays. And keep checking our website for some fun summer activities that we are going to have. Right around July, we're going to be putting out a Narragansett Bay naturalist book that you can do all summer long, filled with definite fun activities that you can do with your friends and family. And also stay tuned for some information about Save the Bay's virtual camps. We'll see you again on Wednesday.